The next Miami quarterback could currently reside in Berkeley, California.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth, part of the #1 sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for making that the case. Can Michigan do it again? You know what? I'm not going to say no. Why in the world would I? We check in on the G5 and some thoughts on USC as well. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So, let me just start out, lay the groundwork for this particular segment, and get Cal fans to just calm down a bit. This is me just thinking thoughts in my head, not reporting. But Justin Wilcox has been fired as Cal's head coach. Finally, was my reaction to that happening. It took a blowout against Stanford, but you know what? 9 long years, well, some of them were not so long, but a lot of them were. Cal has made the move that has been needed to be made for the last couple of seasons. But I digress. Jaren Keawe-Sagapolutele got off to a blistering hot start this year as a true freshman for the Bears. They had a veteran quarterback in the room, Devin Brown, the transfer from Ohio State, and JKS was starting. And I thought, well, hey, that's odd. Is he really that good, or is Brown just not the guy? Well, the answer became clear very quickly. JKS is that type of guy. Now, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows this year. For which true freshman quarterback is it? Bryce Underwood, who we'll talk about later on this show. It's not always going to be perfect. It just isn't. But JKS has immense talent, was a borderline 5-star recruit coming out of high school, and to me, just looks like the reincarnation at the collegiate level of Michael Penix. He has got an insanely good repertoire of attributes, and the production is there. He's got a season of college football where he's led a program that doesn't always make a bowl game to a bowl game, and we'll see what they do this week with an interim head coach in Nick Rolovich and SMU coming to town. But this feels so Miami to me. Again, that's just my gut reaction. When I think about where he could wind up in 2026, yes, Berkeley is an option. I have it on good authority that Cal has made from the moment the season started and they went to Oregon State and he was incredible. From that moment on, they have been getting their NIL affairs in order. Ron Rivera is the general manager of the football program, who was, of course, heavily involved in the decision to move on from Coach Wilcox. So, like Andrew Luck at Stanford, this is Ron Rivera's program right now. He's looking for his head coach, but he knows if you want to attract a quality pool of candidates, having a quote-unquote franchise quarterback who has 2 years of eligibility left is a heck of a strong pitch. Conversely, Miami just went out in the last cycle and paid top dollar to get Carson Beck away from Georgia, a guy who had Power 4 experience, has NFL potential, and JKS has both of those things. So Miami's quarterback room, as I understand it, I don't think they automatically have a guy. They have physical bodies, scholarship players. I don't think any would win a quarterback battle with Jaren Keawe-Sagapolutele. So if Miami can go out and make this happen for a third straight transfer quarterback who hasn't always been perfect this year, we'll see how he does against Pitt on the road this week with Miami fighting for a playoff spot that they should get over Notre Dame, but might get left out. We'll see what the committee does with the rankings on Tuesday night. They went out and got Cam Ward from the West Coast. That worked out pretty well. They went out and got Carson Beck. For the most part, it's gone pretty well. Yep, SMU was a bad day. Yep, Louisville was a bad day. Louisville was a worse performance, I think, from Carson Beck than SMU. Neither were particularly great. But it's the principle I'm seeing. Miami has been willing to go out in the portal and get one of the best transfer quarterbacks available. Well, JKS, as I'm recording the show, is not in the portal. But now you throw a wrinkle into things, because the way I just explained it is Cal's going to want to make a pitch to any head coach. Hey, we've got JKS locked down at quarterback. Now, my understanding is he likes it there. Obviously, he picked Cal and always wanted to go to school there. He was at Oregon for about an hour. That's never where he really wanted to be. Cal was the spot that he wanted. That's where he is. But when you introduce a coaching change, you can't tell me it isn't more likely that he could wind up in the portal. He was already going to field offers. I bet you he's already been contacted in, the tampering world and such. I'm sure that that's again speculative on my part, but feel pretty good with that hunch. I'm sure he has gotten contacted by other schools that would like to acquire his services in the future because he is ridiculously talented. And it's impressive, frankly, that Cal got him to come to their school, because that's not a program that has been up at its peak in a very long time. He's a guy, I believe, that can guide them back to where they feel they're capable of being, where Ron Rivera wants to take them. Well, they better get some money together, because with all the money and NIL collectives in college football, man, someone is going to go out and pay several $1 million for that guy. So if Cal can get that together and sell them on their new head coach, hey, great, but you better get these wheels in motion. Now, their interim head coach, this is wild. For those that don't know this, their interim head coach is Nick Rolovich. One-time coach at Hawaii, at Washington State before that. Didn't end up in Pullman because of the results on the field. That was an off-the-field matter. And the other guy who's their offensive coordinator is Brian Harsin, who has a long-running history of success going back to his time at Boise State on the West Coast. Could either of those guys be candidates? I bet they will. But this could come back to a JKS question. This feels very NFL in that a decision from the organization could be made that heavily involves the quarterback because you want to keep him happy. That doesn't happen as much in college. It happens all the time in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers has been bringing in his guys to different stops for years. Why? Because the organization knows, got to keep Aaron happy. Got to give Aaron what he wants. We want Aaron to stay here. I think that could be a part of this because JKS is going to have offers of all the quarterbacks. I think this is going to be a much more loaded and wild quarterback portal cycle that comes in early January than what we had last year. Last year, there were some big names that moved, no doubt. You got John Mateer at Oklahoma, 1 game away from making the college football playoff. Carson Beck at Miami could wind up in the college football playoff. But you compare it to past cycles and the caliber of transfer that has changed schools, it's not exactly the same. I think this upcoming cycle is going to be absolutely stacked. Another name to watch, check out Drew Mestemaker. Might talk about him later on the show at North Texas. And his head coach, Eric Morris, maybe his offensive coordinator. Those guys could all be on the move from North Texas after this year. But this feels very Miami to me. It is not the only place that would fit. If Indiana is serious, and seems like they are with Curt Cignetti there, boy, if I were JKS, I'd take a good hard look. Fernando Mendoza is going to the NFL draft after this year. What in the world do you not like about Indiana? What doesn't appeal? The track record of back-to-back transfer quarterbacks. That's what he's done so far. Curt Cignetti hasn't had a guy that, has been a high school recruit. I don't fault him for it. There are several SEC schools that would be better at quarterback if they had JKS. So there's the coaching angle. I think names to watch here. Reportedly, Tosh Lupoi, Oregon's defensive coordinator. Sean Lewis doing a great job this year at San Diego State, has head coaching experience, has been doing a really good job. Jim Mora just won 8 or 9 games at UConn again. Guy's been around the West Coast for a long time. Maybe he wants to come back there. Plenty of options. But I think from a national standpoint, the far more interesting thing is, will he wind up transferring or will he stay? That dynamic, watch to see how that plays out. Because if he goes in the portal, boy, when he's got 2 years of eligibility left that he has to use, you could see a bidding war for a transfer quarterback, the likes of which we just simply haven't seen. At least not that I can remember. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. Can Michigan do it again? Of course they can. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. I have a piece of advice for everybody out there listening to or watching this segment right now. Go back to fading my best bets. I can't convince you that it's going to change. I just 2-10 in the last 2 weeks after getting all the way back over 500. Just a complete and utter disaster. So if you want to go fade the picks, I'd encourage you to do it at this point. I don't know if I'm going to be able to turn around. I'm going to try. I do not know if I will succeed. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Can Michigan do it again? Of course they could do it again. The Wolverines are, according to our friends at FanDuel, a 9.5-point home underdog to Ohio State. And yes, I think Ohio State's going to win the game. Yes, I will be surprised if Michigan wins. My level of surprise on a scale of 1 to last year would be a 2. It would be a 2. Michigan has quietly started playing some really good football. Offense got in a rhythm against Maryland last week for whatever that is worth. The Wolverines have started to get themselves going. They've started to get Bryce Underwood going, throwing the ball in the last couple of weeks, which, as a true freshman, you'd expect, and frankly, as a Michigan fan, you'd probably hope to see, because you want to see your players getting developed over the course of the year and over the course of their careers. And I've been bullish on Bryce Underwood for a long time. The term coming out party in football is one that is applicable in this game in a way. I think most of the country knows about Bryce Underwood, but Bryce Underwood can make himself a Michigan legend if he wins this game. Make no mistake about it. If Michigan wins this game, you will hear me, and I think the committee as well, lobby for the Wolverines to make the college football playoff. They could still make the Big Ten championship game in the right scenario, because remember, one of their losses was to USC earlier this year. One of their other losses, the only other loss, was to Oklahoma on the road. So when you look at the Wolverines' resume, are there a bunch of great wins? No, there are not. But the term quality loss gets thrown around a lot down in SEC country. Notre Dame is a great example of this. Quality losses. Okay, the 2 losses Michigan has, Oklahoma, top 10. USC, probably top 20, at least top 25. Where's the ugly loss? There is no horrible, there's no Florida State beating Alabama. There is no unranked loss. None of that. Do they have a bunch of great wins? No, but they don't have any really bad losses. And if you then added in arguably the best win in college football this year, I think Indiana going to Oregon was really, really good. Notre Dame, or Texas A&M going to Notre Dame, also really good. But if Michigan beats number 1 undefeated Ohio State again, I mean, I don't even want to think about what would happen in the great city of Columbus, Ohio. We'll just save that thought potentially for another day. They're in the playoff no matter what. They could lose this game, go win the national championship game again. That's an interesting trade-off. If you're an Ohio State fan, would you rather beat Michigan, not win the national championship, or lose to Michigan again and then go win a second straight national championship? I'm genuinely curious what that particular response would be. But Ohio State is a really good football team, and I'm not in the camp of what has Ohio State done and their resume is this and blah, blah. Yeah, I'm not there. I've watched the football games. I know Ohio State's really good. If Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate come back in this game, and I suspect that they will and hope that they will, because I wouldn't want there to be anything in this game other than every team having its best players. If that happens and then Bryce Underwood beats Ohio State, you will see a 2-year hype train for a Michigan quarterback, the likes of which I just don't think we've seen before. And he won't ever put up massive numbers because he's in Michigan's offense, and that's okay. But this would be, as a true freshman with a playoff spot on the line, you cement yourself as an instant legend in Ann Arbor. And you don't even have to go win the national championship in your career. That moment could just stand as, remember that time you had to win to get into the playoff, which I think they should have to do. 9-3 Michigan's not getting in. I don't think a single 3-loss team is making the playoff, and I'm here for it. I'm very, very here for it. So, can Michigan do it? Yes. I think they're capable. Confidence boost after last week, playing at home, and you just can't ever overlook the rivalry factor. I don't usually make picks this early in the week, but there are a lot of games to pick, and I do think Ohio State's winning this one. But will I swallow the points in a rivalry game? Absolutely not. 9.5, according to our friends at FanDuel. Give me Ohio State 27, Michigan 23. They find a way. So Vanderbilt goes to Tennessee. Vanderbilt's the higher-ranked team. Tennessee is, according to Vegas, the better team. That's just according to our friends at FanDuel, because they've got this at Tennessee minus 2.5. This game is in Knoxville. Now, Vanderbilt is in a really difficult spot because the Commodores, we'll see where they wind up with their college football playoff ranking later tonight. The Commodores could go 10-2 in the SEC, which on the surface, at a glance, without any context or details or anything like that, puts you in the college football playoff. If you'd asked me before the year or anybody else, based on the 1 year of 12-team data that we've got, no, 10-2 SEC gets you in. Vanderbilt could win this game and miss the playoff. That's entirely realistic. I think they're fighting helmet bias, and I think they're fighting the fact that they've lost their biggest games of the season. They've beaten the living daylights out of some others. Just ask Kentucky last week, who, think whatever you want of Kentucky. But hey, Vanderbilt played like a playoff team last week against a vastly inferior opponent. This is true. This is very true. And when Vanderbilt played Texas, they only ended up losing by 3, but they also trailed by 24 points and then had a 21-0 fourth quarter. That counts. Does the committee see it that way? I don't know. But I think Vanderbilt is fighting an uphill perception battle. They could really use to ensure they get in at 10-2, not just a win in this game, but go to Knoxville and win by 10 or more. You do that, that's going to be hard to ignore. But is Tennessee going to get it done? I'm holding off on this one. I'm holding off. This is not a microwave pick like Ohio State, Michigan. This is a crock pot pick. This one's got to simmer. It's low. You're making pork shoulder. Okay, can't do that in a couple minutes. That's what that pick is. But Vandy at Tennessee, interesting playoff implications there. And then, oh man, the good old ACC. If you missed my segment on Monday's show about the ACC championship game scenarios, let me tell you, I've never had another segment like that, where I almost, even though I was reading information of different scenarios, I was almost confusing myself. I bet I threw some of you for a loop. That's probably the most repeated segment for people's consumption on this very program in the history of Locked On College Football. I don't think there's ever one where people went back more and said, I got to hear that again. Miami gets in with what? SMU gets in with... has to get in with a win. And oh, by the way, in case you ever thought for some reason that I planned these shows coincidentally or by accident, I do not. Here's Cal. Here's Cal's chance for Nick Rolovich, interim head coach, to make a statement is a one-game sample size with 2 previous successful on-field results at Hawaii and at Washington State. Would a one-game sample size beating SMU in the midst of a return trip to the college football playoff push, would that be enough for Cal to say, all right, we got to hire Nick Rolovich as the head coach? That's pretty small. That's a pretty small sample size. Very small. The smallest, some would say. But maybe they'd watch the bowl game too and see what happens with the Bears. SMU's got to go all the way to Berkeley. They're a 10.5-point favorite according to our friends at FanDuel. I think SMU's more driven. I think the chaos can certainly make this interesting. SMU's a better football team top to bottom since the early losses to Big 12 schools to kind of begin the season. They have really rebounded. They have settled in. I'll take SMU to go on the road and win, but JKS puts up some points, finds a way to cover. 30-24. I'll take SMU over the Bears. Early picks this week on the show. For a crossover check-in like you can't believe, USC and the Group of Five. Let's get into it. So, the CFP rankings last week included one Group of Five team, Tulane at number 24. They then went on the road, knocked off Temple, no problem. The Owls did not hoot past them. Did that work? Did that land? I don't know. I'm sticking with it. I'm going to leave that in the show. I didn't have to, but I'm going to. So, they survive. But if you notice the AP rankings, which don't get a lot of attention this time of year because, well, they don't matter compared to the playoff rankings. This is so classic AP Top 25. They have James Madison at 20, North Texas at 21. There's Eric Morris and Drew Mestamaker. Told you they'd be coming up again on the show. James Madison, 20, North Texas, 21, Tulane at 22. That's the AP. You know what the AP is infatuated with? And when I say this, it's going to sound like I have a certain perception based on last year's playoff teams and those that got in and those that were left out and all that sort of stuff. But the AP loves record. Boy, they love good records. I bet how many AP voters do you think know what James Madison's schedule is or know what North Texas's schedule is? If you want to rank James Madison and North Texas and Tulane, there's an argument for that to happen. James Madison being above North Texas and Tulane when they play in a significantly worse conference is completely absurd. Tulane put 3 Power 4 teams on their schedule. James Madison beat 1 and lost, and they're not a top 25 team. Tulane's loss to a Power 4 team is currently ranked inside the top 10 in the college football playoff rankings. It's Ole Miss. So, North Texas's loss earlier this year did not come to a Power 4 team. They don't have a Power 4 win, but they at least play in the American. That's a better conference. So, that's the first thing that's illogical. The second thing is that, do you think any of the AP voters that put them there have sat down, start to finish, or even in the background for 2 quarters, watched a Tulane, James Madison, or North Texas game? I have, of course, because I'm a sicko for this sort of stuff, and I take that show title that you can see in the bottom right corner on YouTube, Locked On College Football, very seriously. I watch all sorts of football that most people wonder, why in the world are you watching that? Football knowledge, duh. So, anyway, I have had Tulane as the best Group of 5 resume so far. And I hope they meet North Texas in the American Championship game, because I think that's the combination of the 2 best and most deserving teams in that conference, which for this year is the best Group of 5 league in the country. So if those 2 meet, winner goes to the playoff. I will not argue the point. I will absolutely look at North Texas and say, all right, I had Tulane as my highest ranked G5, and they beat them straight up on a neutral field. Results have to matter. North Texas would be in that scenario, and they'd be there at 12-1 with an offense that can score as many points as, frankly, anyone that I have seen play football this year. I'm not so certain. All right, I'm not going to make that statement, have that particular debate. North Texas offense is really good, is the bottom line. Tulane's offense can be really good. Tulane's defense, not very good defending the pass. Let's get to that hypothetical when we get there, shall we? I don't see a path, unless somebody other than those 2 teams in the American, for James Madison to get in. Unless, let me offer this, and I'm curious to see, by the time some of you are listening to or watching this show, we're going to have college football playoff rankings, and we'll know if a second Group of 5 team has entered the chat. Because if they do, there is a real-world scenario. It's not likely, but it is entirely possible, as I talked about yesterday, where 2 Group of 5 teams are into the playoff, and the ACC doesn't get a team to go because they leave out Miami, which would be incredibly wrong. And if the ACC champion is Duke, I can almost assure you the committee will not put in a 5-loss Duke Blue Devil team. Now, That requires a very specific set of circumstances, but it's very possible. It's incredibly possible. Heck, I'm curious to see what they do with SMU. If the Mustangs go back to the ACC title game and they're in at 10-3, would they put them? They did last year, right? Clemson was a 10-3 team, got to go on the road and play Texas. It was a competitive game. I think that would be the case. But for the group of five, the path to getting two teams in the playoff, look, I'm putting it at less than 10%, but I can't in good faith put it at 0%. Still, though, the only team that truly controls its own path to getting there is Tulane. Everybody else needs help. But if they get that help is often given to those in college football who hold their own, as I always say. I want to close with thoughts on USC. They went up to Oregon and lost. USC struggled to run the ball. They struggled to stop Oregon running the ball despite the Ducks playing literally their fifth depth chart offensive tackle at one point in the game. So this season, once USC beats UCLA this week, which they absolutely will, they'll end the year at 9-3, which is exactly what I predicted them record-wise to be when the season kicked off. Before the season kicked off, I should say. I'm sure plenty of Trojan fans are disappointed that they weren't able to go up and beat Oregon, because that has become, especially as USC blew up the Pac-12 and then Oregon came along for the ride and they didn't want Oregon in the conference. Yeah, I'm sure that added some fuel to the fire, and that went in a negative direction. It wasn't a celebratory burning of a couch emotionally for USC fans after the game on Saturday. USC has taken a significant step forward. They are recruiting the way that they are supposed to, and on the field this year, they are a better football team. Last year, I imagine for most Trojan fans, was pretty excruciating. They went on the road and lost to Maryland. They went on the road and lost to Minnesota. They went on the road and lost to Michigan on the last play. Well, they lost one of those games to Illinois this year, but the other two losses for USC, they just got outplayed because Lincoln Riley, after 2 years of being USC's head coach, has now begun the process of building a program that he should have done from the moment that he arrived. He didn't do that, but he's recognized his mistake, and now they've gone out and paid the NIL dollars required to get a guy like Jakeem Stewart, who I think is their best interior defensive lineman. Certainly he is one of them, playing a bunch as a true freshman. He's going to be an absolute monster. USC should have a defense loaded with those sorts of guys. Instead, a bunch of backup offensive linemen at Oregon ran for 179 yards with a great trio of running backs. So USC's progress this year has been absolutely tangible. I said going into the game, USC wins that one, they're going to be in the playoff. They should control their own fate. You go to Eugene and win. Okay, they didn't. In no way. On my fan mood assessment, look, it's bad vibes for USC because you're not going to the playoff. But overall on the year, it's a good vibe season. This is the sort of year that USC needed to have. If they win their bowl game, they'll have a 10-win campaign. Haven't done that since Lincoln Riley's first year. Progress, frankly, I think USC fans, at least the ones that I've interacted with, are pretty reasonable about this. Because I think they realize, you know what? It did need to kind of start over mid-Lincoln Riley's tenure. And D'Anton Lynn is a game changer as defensive coordinator. But there's still work to be done. There is still work to be done with that USC program. I don't think Lincoln Riley has it anywhere near what its peak is with him as the head coach. He stays there and keeps the high school recruiting efforts with Chad Bowden, their GM, for the next several cycles. And you can see a USC team that can go contend for a Big Ten championship with any team in the league. Oregon, USC, Michigan at its, Ohio State, Michigan at its peak, Penn State if they get back, depending on who they hire. They're capable of doing that. And the steps are being taken. And Saturday was a reminder. Not there yet. Are they getting there? Yes. They have taken a step forward, but it takes several steps. You have to stack, you have to build, and he's doing that. It just didn't come to fruition on Saturday in a perfect storm, which is kind of what you would have needed to beat Oregon, who's ahead of you in that front. But you know it was a measuring stick game, and you can come away going, okay, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. Shockingly, or perhaps not, because that was sarcastic, USC in a big game was outgained on the ground. They've gotten better this year. Steps. Progress. Moving forward. End of show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.